People, it's Miss Rachel. Today I am going to read you a book called The Spiffiest Giant in Town, and it is written by Julia Donaldson, and the pictures are done by Alex Schiffler. And it's by the exact same duo who have brought us The Gruffalo, Room on the Broom, and The Snail and the Whale, some of my most favorite books. And before I start reading, I just want to remind everyone I do not own this book. I do not own the words. I don't own the pictures. I just love it, and I wanted to read it to you. The Spiffiest Giant in Town. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same pair of old brown sandals and the same old patched up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said sadly. But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of spiffy clothes. So he bought a spiffy shirt, a spiffy pair of pants, a spiffy belt, a spiffy striped tie, some spiffy socks with diamonds on the sides, and a pair of spiffy shiny shoes. Now I'm the spiffiest giant in town, he said proudly. Look at those fancy socks. Wow, go George. George left his old clothes behind in the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the sidewalk stood a giraffe who was sniffing sadly. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my neck," said the giraffe. "It's so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a nice warm scarf." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his striped tie. "It didn't match my socks anyway," he said, as he wound it around and around the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. "Thank you," said the giraffe. As George strode away toward home, he sang to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." And for my friends who don't know what strode away means, it means he's walking away. And there he goes. George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. And if you don't know what bleating means, it's the noise a goat makes. "Ah, ah." "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sail," said the goat. "It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat." Who knew boats could be driven by goats? "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his new white shirt. "It kept coming untucked anyway," he said, as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. "Thank you," said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. But look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." There we go. George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's our house," squeaked the mother mouse. "It burned down, and now we have nowhere to live. I wish we had a nice new house." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his shiny new shoes. "It was giving me blisters anyway," he said, as the mouse and her baby scrambled inside. The shoe made a perfect home for them. "Thank you," they squeaked. George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind. As he hopped, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. But look me up and down, I'm still the spiffiest giant in town." I love George. He's so kind. George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sleeping bag," said the fox. "I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag." Oops, almost dropped the book. Can anybody guess what George might have got that was very spiffy that could be used as a sleeping bag for a fox? Bet you can think of it. Here it comes. "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his socks with diamonds on the sides. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said. As the fox snuggled in, it made a very fine sleeping bag. "Thank you," said the fox. George hopped along, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. But look me up and down. I'm the spiffiest giant in town." And there it is, my favorite, a little snail. And thank goodness that sock's still clean, hopefully. George came to a big squishy bog, which is a big area full of mud. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's this bog," said the dog. "I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry path." What on earth could our spiffy giant George do for this dog? Something to help him get across the mud. Here it comes. "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his spiffy new belt. "It was squeezing my tummy anyway," he said as he laid it down over the bog. It made an excellent path. "Thank you," said the dog. The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for my cold giraffe. My shirt's on the boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. My belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. But what on earth is happening to that poor giant's pants? His fancy pants. Uh-oh. My pants are falling down. I'm the coldest giant in town." Suddenly, George felt sad and shivery, and not at all spiffy. He stood on one foot and thought, "I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes," he decided. He turned around and he hopped all the way back to the shop. Are you ready to see our spiffy giant in his underpants? Uh-oh. And it's windy, poor George. When he got to the shop, it was closed. "Oh, no!" cried George. He sank down onto the sidewalk, and a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all of the animals that he had met on his way home. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. George looked a little bit closer. "My gown!" he yelled. "My dear old gown and my sandals!" George put them all back on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. "I'm the coziest giant in town," he cried, and he danced back home along the road. I hope you're all feeling very cozy as you listen to this, just like George. Outside his front door stood all of the animals he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. "Come on, George," they said. "Open it, open it." George untied the ribbon, and inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. "Read the card, George," said the animals. George put the crown on his head and opened the card. Inside it said, "You gave your scarf to a cold giraffe, your shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, your shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of your socks is a bed for a fox, your belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog, so here is a very fine crown to go with the sandals and your gown of the kindest giant in town." And there's the animal writing. Oh, there it is. And that is the end of the spiffiest giant in town. I hope you liked it very much. And like always, I miss you and I love you so, 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 so much. I'll talk to you soon.